Open World Leadership Program is known in Central Asia, but many people ask about the origins of the program, the goals of this program, because, as you know, there's a lot of suspicion towards U.S.-funded programs. What do they really do? You know, what's the mission? What's the hidden mission? Who supports them? Who stands behind them? So tell us about the program, the background of this program.
Well, it was started in 1999, and there were two people who were really at the heart and soul of this. One was the Librarian of Congress, James Billington, who is one of the foremost scholars of the cultural history of the region, that is Russia and elsewhere, and academician Likhachov from Petersburg. And the reason why they started it was that they had this idea really from the breakup of the Soviet Union. They wanted to have people to come to the United States just to see what it is without an agenda, without trying to propagandize. And so in 1999, they got interest in Congress. And so it was started in Congress. It was bicameral, that is both the House of Representatives and the Senate. It was bipartisan, Republicans and Democrats. And in 2000, the Congress created a law to make it official. And so we are an independent agency of the legislative branch. And as one of our board members, Senator Wicker, said, the best thing about, or one of the best things about this program is that it isn't following the particular policies and initiatives of a particular administration. So Open World wasn't following the initiatives of President Bush, or it doesn't follow President Obama. It's very steady. And we don't have those ups and downs of the executive branch, which has to manage foreign policy. The goals of the program are relatively simple. We bring people who are, we hope, rising professionals, know their business, and we link them to counterparts in the U.S. Very intense, very short. It's a day of orientation here, and then usually 8 or 9 days in communities throughout the United States. So judges with judges, mayors with mayors, parliamentarians, regional parliamentarians with the state senators and state representatives, educators, doctors, NGO leaders. It's a whole range.
So you play a role of a bridge. You connect them.
Yes.
How are they selected, the participants? How do you go about selecting them?
It's done by nominations. And so each country, it's slightly different, but basically we don't want individuals self-nominating. So in some countries and regions, we use, at least in part, government organizations. So for example, Russian judges were often nominated by the Council of Judges. In other places, they're nominated by American grantees who have a partnership. So there's an organization called Keystone in Pennsylvania, and they operate in Azerbaijan, Ukraine, Russia, Moldova, and they do kind of mental health sorts of things, and so they nominate for us. We have brought jazz musicians, and so we look at the jazz experts in the country and also the hosts, like the Brubeck Institute, who have connections with the jazz world in Eurasia, and they nominate.
How closely do you work with the governments? Do you have any kind of I guess, communication or cooperation?
So let's say we want to bring legislators to the United States. We naturally will go to Parliament. And we ask that they nominate and select their newest members because those are the folks that we would like to bring. They tend to be a little younger. If we're doing judges, then there would be involvement of the structure for judges, and it differs from country to country. If we're doing, let's say, a trafficking in persons, that is anti-trafficking, we would go to NGOs rather than to the government. Though I will tell you that even in the trafficking arena, we like to bring prosecutors and police because you can't just have the NGO advocates. You've got to have the people who do the law enforcement. And if they don't come along, then you're not going to be accomplishing as much.
If I am let's say, a rising professional in Uzbekistan, country where you don't currently work, and would like to participate in this program, what are my options?
You're right. We do work through the embassies. The embassies issue the visas, and through the public affairs programs, they often help coordinate the nominations. And so if you are, let's say, a blogger in Uzbekistan, and we began programs in Uzbekistan, you could go to the public affairs section of the embassy and say, hey, I'm a blogger, I heard about this program, and if you're thinking about it, this is a sample of my work, this is the link, you can take a look. So you can make yourself known, and they would nominate you.
What kind of a role do you think you play in helping people come together?
One of the groups we brought were educators from the provinces around Tajikistan. And these people are in such direct contact with the individuals in their cities and towns and villages that you really do get much more of a direct impact there. The other thing I would mention is that we don't want to focus on capitals, and that goes in two ways. Number one, we don't want only people from Tashkent or Astana or Bishkek or Dushanbe. We want to make sure we get folks from the regions. The same thing goes for here. We bring people to Washington partially to get over jet lag and to do at least a one-day orientation on what this government, how it functions, and the difference between federal and state governments, which is significant in the United States. But their time is spent outside of Washington. The example I would give is that if I came to Uzbekistan and I spent a week in Tashkent and I told you, well, I've been to Uzbekistan, I understand, and you say, no, you have to go to Fergana, you've got to go to Bukhara, you've got to go to Samarkand, you have to go to the west, out by the Aral Sea, because it's a big country and it's very different from region to region. Same thing with us. You come to Washington and stay here, you're not going to know the U.S., but if you go to Iowa, if you go to Oregon, Wisconsin.
What do your participants go back with, in your view? What do they take back from America to their countries? Things that are doable, things that are practical.
Yeah, I think they take back two things. One is a different impression of the United States. And one great example, I thought, was an individual who was from the regional Duma, Lena Oblast, and he and his colleagues came to Annapolis and were hosted by the legislature there. And on the last night, there was a farewell dinner, and I was talking to him, and I didn't even ask him this question, but he said, you know what was really, really good about this? He said, staying in an American family. He said, I really understood America by doing that in a way I didn't from previous visits. In terms of practical things, it depends on what the interest is. So for example, the issue of infant mortality and maternal health is critical, both before birth and after birth. And we have programs where individuals from clinics and hospitals that specialize come to the U.S. We had a group that came to Georgia, went back, and they implemented relatively inexpensive procedural changes that actually rose or depressed the rate of infant deaths. Now that's really something. We've had other programs where partnerships have been formed between Dushanbe and Colorado Springs, where The people from Colorado Springs put an internet cafe in Dushanbe, paid for it and set it up. We had a group of Kyrgyz parliamentarians here in 2007. They went to Utah and to Montana, and the president of the Utah Senate and the majority leader of the Montana Senate did a reverse visit in 2008. 2010, in April, as you know, there was the revolution and President Bakiyev was removed. Well, one of the people who was writing part of the Constitution, the judicial portion, was an individual who was in Montana. And the president of the Montana Senate said, listen, I want to get in touch with him. Can you give me his coordinates? And we did. She sent him a copy of the Montana Constitution, and we just checked with him later to see what the difference was. And what he said was, when I was in the US, the thing that really impressed me was the transparency and accountability of the government. And he said, when I was writing my portion of the Constitution, that was in my mind, that I wanted to make our institutions really accountable and transparent. So that's pretty profound.
Now we know that you're expecting a group of participants from Tajikistan, and you work in Kyrgyzstan, you work in Kazakhstan. Why don't you work in Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan?
We are in Turkmenistan, and I have sent a letter to Mr. Safayev in Tashkent, and I'm hoping that we can start with the legislators in Uzbekistan, bringing them here. And my full intention is to begin a program in Uzbekistan, and it's in our strategic plan. The board, the majority of which are members of Congress, support it. So I'm ready to do it. I just need a little help from the Uzbek side.
The other side,
yes. Yes.
They have to meet you halfway.
Well, a quarter of the way would be fine.
Well, you're a diplomat for a long time. You're a retired diplomat. But what you now do is a public diplomacy, isn't it?
It is, yes.
So in that way, you are actually helping the U.S. to improve the relations with these countries.
Yes.
Is that how you see your role?
I'm not bound by public diplomacy strategy of any administration, because I've got 535 bosses, 100 senators, 435 members of the House, broad political spectrum, broad geographic distribution. And so what I do is public diplomacy, but it's public diplomacy without an agenda. It is just building up from the periphery out, or the periphery in, and the bottom up, the context and the confidence that we can have with one another.
Do you think those programs with a political agenda work?
Yeah, but understand, it's short term. It's this issue, and you address that issue. The programs that I think work very well are ones that, in a sense, are longer term. So there's a Muskie program where, again, really smart people from the region come to the U.S. for a year or two, and then the requirement is they go back to their countries and they spend at least 2 to 4 years back in the country, and that, that's a great contribution to both sides, frankly. I think it's the difference between spending your time or investing your time. And I think that what we're doing is investing. And we're investing in the people who are coming, and we're investing in the people in the U.S. And that investment is just the partnerships that they can form.